Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Wednesday, March 16th, 2022. I'm your host, George Kerth, here along with the two best friends anyone could ask for. Tyler Snyder's back in the house. Tyler, how you feeling today?
You know, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a little anxious. It's the most we've gotten to talk about football since football season ended, so I'm just excited. I'm excited for all the big moves happening.
And we're excited to have you back after you missed last week's flurry of news, but Cody Roadcap's with us here as well. Cody, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing good, George. I think I'm going to criticize you right at the top, John. I'm sorry, but
Okay.
I need a little bit more excitement out of you. You're a little too laid back today, knowing that I know free agency is officially starts today at the time that this podcast comes out. But there's so much NFL news, and you're like, welcome back to another episode. Like football season, like prime football season, we're going to go into a lull until April, and the draft really picks up. So get excited for these few days.
All right, fine. Next week, I'm going to make you do the intro because the last time you did the intro, you went, hey, it's the Couch GMs podcast. Tyler Snyder's here. So, really on today's show, we're going to talk some NFL news and notes, a lot of trade news, and a couple other things mixed in there. And we are going to give our reactions to our early free agency signings. I guess they're agreements. They're not technically signings until after the show comes on air, but you can find us on thecouchgms.com and on our social media channels to get more than you get from just this show, especially on thecouchgms.com right now. Make sure you check out our free agency tracker where we track everybody that we're going to talk about in today's show and more. Guys, why don't we jump into NFL news? And we'll start off NFL news with the reason I was probably a little bit sad sounding at the beginning of the show. And I'm not going to say much here. I'm just going to intro and let you guys talk. Tom Brady unretired.
Oh my gosh, I'm so shocked. Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the most obvious thing that was going to happen. I don't know if because Adam Schefter broke the report, if he felt forced into retirement. I don't know if he just, didn't give it enough time. Speaking of giving it time, I remember talking last week how everybody was mad at Aaron Rodgers for taking so long on deciding his future. Even though he said he would do it before free agency, and he made his decision before free agency. Like he said, Tom Brady unretires. Everyone's like, oh, we're so happy to have him back. No one's criticizing him. Just always love to look at how the media portrays one and the other.
Well, they actually were criticizing him mostly because he announced his unretirement during the bracket reveal for March Madness, and everyone was like, how dare you have to take the spotlight all the time?
I can see it. And did you also see that there's also a report that one of the sports books in Vegas wants the NFL to do some investigating because there was like a big bet placed on the Buccaneers to win the Super Bowl, and they think they had some insider knowledge that Tom Brady was going to come back. So could be interesting there on some of the gambling front, but gambling is not my forte, so I should probably stop talking about it.
Yeah. So I got two notes on this, and then I'll move on. Wow, I totally blanked on what my two notes were because I was thinking it the whole time, and then you were talking, and it just went out of my head.
Someone's rusty.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I am rusty. Look, I've been away. You guys have to record every other weekend without me, so I need to stay fresh. But look, it's not very exciting news. We all kind of expect him to come back. My thought was maybe he was trying to be like the Undertaker when he's in a match and you think he's dead, and then he does this whole sit-up thing, and oh my gosh, he's alive, and things go crazy, and oh, he's back. It really wasn't that kind of an excitement. Most people didn't want him to come back, so I don't think it had that level of excitement, but I think I might be totally off here, and this might be insulting, but I'm going to say it anyway. It sounded like the reason he wanted to retire in the first place was to spend some time with his family. Well, this dude just spent like 2 weeks with his family and immediately was like, yeah, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. How bad is his family to be around? All right. I might be going a little too far here, but that's just the way it looked to me.
Yeah, no, I think...
Go ahead, George. I've already talked.
Okay. I mean, I was just going to comment. I think the funniest thing about what you said there, and I agree with you, is I've seen two memes like circling through social media about this whole Tom Brady thing. One of them is the Undertaker, and the other one is like Tom Brady trying to retire for 0.2 seconds, and it's a guy with the veins popping out of his neck. I've also seen that spun to him trying to spend time with his family. So you're right on. You're not the only one with that argument. You're not off.
It looks a little bad.
Yeah, and I
just
think
saying.
it does feel a little judgy, but it's okay. That's what the internet's for and the meme culture out there. But how does this affect the outcome of the NFC? Like, are the Bucks instantly like back to being favorites? I know they're now tied with the Packers at plus 350 to win the NFC. Like, where does your guys' thoughts? Where were you with the Bucks beforehand, coming back with Tom Brady now?
Well, I think that's a little hard to say because after Tom Brady retired, we didn't know who the Bucks quarterback was going to be. We didn't know if they were going to draft somebody, if they were going to try to make a big splash move. Maybe they would be in on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes if Brady stayed retired, or maybe they would have had to settle for somebody like a Mitch Trubisky, or maybe they were going to go out and try to trade for a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Derek Carr, like some of these other guys we've heard the names circled around. So you really don't know. It would depend on who they had. So I think obviously their odds have to get a little bit better because you have the stability. You know that it's going to be a solid quarterback. I mean, I don't think Brady is what he once was. I did see a little bit of decline out of him this past season, it seemed. I mean, he was still able to put up the stats, but he didn't have the big arm that I think. I mean, he's never had a huge arm, but he at least had a little bit more depth in his arm, and I didn't see that this past season. Granted, he also was throwing to Gronk, who I think is one of the slowest tight ends in the league right now, on almost every other pass. But hey, Chris Godwin's coming back, so that's big. Bucks went out and got Russell Gage, so that's big. And now you got Tom Brady coming back, and that division really doesn't look all that scary yet. So right now, I think the Bucks' odds of winning the division are pretty high. And if you can win the division, you always have a shot at that Super Bowl.
The only reason I would say their odds got better with Tom Brady as opposed to without is one, yeah, the draft market for quarterbacks this year is bad. I don't know if they would have been a team that made a splash move. Like Tyler said, that if they would have, it would have made a difference. But even more than that, you're going to see free agents who will want to go play with Tom Brady now. The Bucks got a boost in free agency just because of the name. They also got a boost in bringing guys back because of the name. Like Gronk was expected to go elsewhere. I would not be shocked if Gronk goes back to Tampa Bay now. Same thing with Leonard Fournette. So just right there, the name Tom Brady on the roster helps them, not even because of Tom Brady, but because it's going to help them bring in other pieces around him to try to make that one or two more runs he's going to go for.
So my last question on Tom Brady before we move on, because we've already spent way too much time on Tom Brady, would be, do you think the Bucks had an inkling that this was going to happen well before he actually came back? I just feel like the tagging of Chris Godwin move, to me, feels like they knew they were going to have another chance. If you really do think that Chris Godwin is your future, you try to sign him to a longer-term deal. But honestly, I think if the Bucks weren't getting Brady back, they were ready to start rebuilding, losing Gronk, losing Fournette, losing Brady. Let Godwin walk too. Don't pay top money for franchise tag to a wide receiver coming off an injury unless you think this could be your year again. So do you guys think that they had an inkling of this happening?
I don't know if they had an inkling, but I think they were like all of us and were like, is he really going to walk away after leading the league in passing yards, after losing in last-second fashion to the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs? Like, it never felt right, even as fans. So I'm not saying that they might have had some insider knowledge, but I still think in the back of their mind that they were holding on to this. And Chris Godwin, I think we'll know more too. If they work out a long-term deal with Chris Godwin, then that'll probably signal more to, like you mentioned, that, hey, that was just one of their core guys they wanted to keep. If he plays on the tag and walks next year, I think that'll lead more to your point of, hey, maybe they were more suspect or more knowing of the Tom Brady return.
I think the only reason I feel like they might have had an inkling is more because they were not active in the quarterback market that every other quarterback needy team seemed to have been. Like the Saints don't have a guy, the Panthers don't have a guy, the Broncos went out and traded for a guy. Like all those teams seem to at least be in the conversations for the Carson Wentz and the Jimmy Garoppolo and the Deshaun Watson, and the Buccaneers were completely silent. I think that'd be the only reason I feel like they had an inkling Tom Brady was coming back.
All right, guys. Well, I think we've said inkling way too many times for one podcast. So let's go ahead and move on to the next piece of quarterback news, which is a guy that's close to home for us. And I can't wait to hear the difference of opinions in this one. And that is Carson Wentz traded to the Commanders. That's still going to take some time getting used to. I still don't like
I
it.
said
It
football
just
team
feels
last
wrong.
week. Don't feel bad.
The football team, the Redskins, whatever they are, I don't know anymore, but they are the Commanders with horrible uniforms, and Carson Wentz is going to be the first Commander quarterback. I have my opinions, but what's your thoughts on this trade, guys?
I guess Cody's going to want me to start, so I'll go ahead and start. First off, the Indianapolis Colts still got fleeced because they had a 1-year rental game of a first-round pick. They basically just comped back the second-round pick. But anyway, I think that Carson Wentz is probably better than the other options that Washington had at quarterback. I think he's got to be a slight step up from a Taylor Heineke, as much as I've been a backer of that guy for a while. But I don't see a long-term answer here, especially because the weapons around him are really not a ton better than he's had. You can say that he has some wide receiver talent now with Terry McLaurin there, and that's probably the best wide receiver he's had around, but they're not deep. I think he's going from one situation where we're like, well, maybe if he had weapons, he'd be a decent quarterback, to, again, the same situation where he's going to have a lack of weapons around him, and I don't think he's going to thrive as a Washington Commander.
Okay. I think we're going to disagree on some things. I don't know if, this isn't like a world-breaking move. I don't think it doesn't make the Washington Commanders Super Bowl favorites by any means, but I think he was the best option available via trade. Like I would rather have him over Jimmy Garoppolo. I know Garoppolo wins games, but I would have rather had Carson Wentz over Jimmy Garoppolo. I do think if you look at it, this is some of the best weapons he's had since maybe the year he should have won MVP before getting the ACL injury. But Terry McLaurin is a top wide receiver. Antonio Gibson is a top running back that can also catch passes. Logan Thomas is an underrated tight end. They have some young guys as wide receiver too. They can still sign one. Maybe they'll go out and get a guy like Allen Robinson. Maybe they'll go out and draft, in the first 2 rounds, a wide receiver. As long as they don't spend, $30 million on Zay Jones, they'll be all right. Like, I still like Diami Brown, who they drafted in the 2nd round last year. Like, there's definitely some pieces there. And if they can, they can rein him in, I think that's going to be the big thing that they'll have to do. They can rein him in and rely on that running game, rely on that defense, and just go out and play football. I think Carson Wentz could make a big impact and could have the Commanders win the division this year. Now, that also speaks on how I view the division. Like, I still think the Cowboys are probably the front runners. You can't rule out the Eagles since they made the playoffs, but like, they're right there. It's not a huge needle mover over Tyler Heineke, but I still think it's definitely an upgrade.
So I'm going to be on the other end of this because might as well have 3 different opinions. And I'm the hot takes guy, so I can't just be boring. I think this is a phenomenal move. I think the Commanders just killed it with this trade. I think the Colts got fleeced. I mean, you gave up on a guy because he had one bad game. And if you really want to put blame on Carson Wentz for losing one game that would have meant you making the playoffs, how about the fact that you have a running back that is in MVP conversation and you don't use him in the most important game of the year? Look at the coaching before you look at the quarterback, to be honest with you. Is Carson Wentz elite? No. Is he good? Yeah. Put him in the right situation, he's going to be a solid quarterback, and I do think that Carson Wentz is better than some of the other options that were out there. I like him better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I like him better than trading 3 first-round picks for a Deshaun Watson. I mean, the price that they got him at and the caliber of quarterback you're getting is great. And the thing that I'm most excited for is this man gets to go against the Eagles twice a year. And that is exciting to me. I love it. I want to see... Look, I like the Eagles. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't consider myself
a... Please.
I can't promise
It'll
that
be Thursday night prime time.
Probably. I can't promise that I am an Eagles fan. I am a Titans fan first and foremost, but I do like the Eagles. However, I want to see Carson Wentz and the Commanders beat the Eagles like 87-0. I want to see it. I want to see him absolutely take a huge steaming dump on the Eagles, air it out. I want him to break the passing record. in this game against the Eagles because nothing would make me happier, especially if he does it in Philadelphia. I want to hear the boos from my house an hour away from Philly. I'm excited for this, guys.
Yeah, I'm excited for the games for him to return to the link. I definitely like that. I will say I probably should have mentioned that the Russell Wilson trade, if they could have got Russell Wilson, I think that would have been a better trade option. I know we've talked about the other ones, but that was definitely a big name that got moved. But because they went out and got Carson Wentz, I think he was the best available after that point. And I like this move. It seems like George isn't, but I feel like that's some hate based on him being an Eagles fan and not respecting what Carson Wentz actually did for that team. And when they lose to Carson Wentz and all the Eagles fans wish they have him back this year, it'll be a great thing to see. But you did mention Deshaun Watson, and that's the next guy in the quarterback carousel that we're talking about. And he was cleared from his criminal charges by a grand jury, but he can still face some civil lawsuits. But with that stuff behind him, he is now being looked at as a potential trade candidate. In the rare instance, he has all the control on where he likes to go. The current teams that are leading the race are the Saints, Panthers, Falcons. Pretty much everyone facing Tom Brady is like, hey, we need a quarterback. And then the Browns are a dark horse. So which team do you think makes the most sense, or where are you hoping Deshaun Watson goes?
I think at this point, I think the favorite has to be the Falcons, because it does seem like Deshaun Watson's going to have a bit of a say, especially because of his no trade clause. And I've heard a lot of things going around the news recently that the Falcons ownership really likes Deshaun Watson. Apparently he used to be a ball boy for them back in the day, so he has a relationship with them. I think that would be his first choice. When it comes to best choice, I think if the Saints want to compete again, he's the guy that's going to do it for them. They did decent with Jameis Winston before he got hurt. If they go back to Jameis Winston, they might still be a borderline playoff team, sure. But I think Deshaun Watson would really move the needle for them if they can make it work with their cap situation. That's, I think, the biggest thing about it all. I think that's where he would make the biggest difference right away.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting that it is everybody in that division that is going against Tom Brady is in the mix for this. And I honestly do believe that Deshaun Watson, being an elite level quarterback, that if he does slide in there and play to the ability that we know he can do, he could take any of these teams to winning the division. Because I'm still not 100% sold on the Bucs as much as everybody else is with Tom Brady coming back. So out of these three teams, which one do I think is the best to land Watson? The Saints would have been my answer if they still had Sean Payton. You don't have Sean Payton anymore. Makes it a little less enticing. I don't love the Saints. The Falcons would have been enticing if they still had Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage and Julio Jones and all these exciting people to throw to. He could come in and have just receivers galore. Instead, now it's like, all right, you got Kyle Pitts. And that's it. You got a sophomore tight end. And I mean, even I think Alameda Zaccheaus, I think he's a free agent this year too. I think all of their back. Is he back? Did they re-sign him?
I think he's back.
So I could have swore his contract was up. Either
I think
way,
he was one of those restricted or exclusive rights free agents, so he was technically a free agent, but he really wasn't going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Either way, the receivers over there in Atlanta not looking too great either. But to be honest, are you really that thrilled with the Panthers either? At least you got DJ Moore. That's exciting. I think out of these teams, the team that if I was Deshaun Watson, I would try to go to the most would be the Panthers. I think they have the best receiving threats, at least on the outside. I know the tight end is a lot more enticing with Kyle Pitts. But if I had to take a second choice, it would be the Falcons because I'd like to play with Arthur Smith, a great offensive-minded head coach, see what he can do with you. Personally, the Saints, out for me.
So let me just give you a hypothetical quick before we move to Cody. The Falcons go out and they sign either Allen Robinson or Jarvis Landry, and then they get Melvin Gordon. Kind of push the chips in if they go and get Deshaun Watson. Does that move them to number one for you?
It helps. It definitely,
Guess
it
that's a
definitely
no.
helps. I don't know, because like it's hard for me to look at Allen Robinson as an elite receiver anymore. Because every year we're like, Allen Robinson, here we go. He's about to be back to his old self. But the last few years, he hasn't looked like himself. He hasn't been that exciting. I was bigger than everybody else on Allen Robinson finally being awesome last year and having one of his biggest seasons ever, and then he was just a dud. Melvin Gordon, I mean, he's exciting what he can do with the ball after you throw it to him, but he's getting up there in age. Who knows how well his body's going to hold up or what he still has in him. I think it definitely helps showing that they're willing to go out and get some weapons. I think they're going to have to draft a receiver in the first round if they go out and get Deshaun Watson, if they still have a first-round pick left over after trading for him.
Probably not.
Let's see.
Probably not.
I don't think they will, and that's going to be the big interesting thing for all these teams. I would probably say I think the Panthers would make the most sense, but who are you giving up? Are they going to trade Christian McCaffrey, Derek Brown, and J.C. Horn plus 3 first-round picks back to him? Because I believe they're still asking for 3 players and 3 first-round picks. Is Atlanta going to have to give up because they don't have a big young are they going to have to give up a Kyle Pitts to go get Deshaun Watson? At that point, is it worth it? Like the Saints, I don't even know who the Saints would give up. Same with the Cleveland Browns. Like it's going to be interesting on what the return is and how valuable that is.
Thinking of that, I could think of who the Browns could give up because, I mean, throwing back Baker Mayfield, Kareem Hunt, and one of their 3 tight ends. They're deep at skill positions that are outside of wide receiver.
I mean, that could work, but I think I saw they don't even want Baker.
Well, yeah, that's possible too, but
nobody does at this point. It's kind of sad. But honestly, I think it's in the best interest of the Saints, Panthers, Falcons, and potentially Browns to play the waiting game. Like, yes, the Texans are like, we want 3 first-round picks. We want all these players. We want all this. If you want them, you got to give us all this. But what happens when none of these teams say they're willing to give that up? What happens when all the teams are like, we'll give you 1 first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a player, when they reduce it to that? Are the Texans really going to pay the money of Deshaun Watson and get nothing in return, have him just sit out again an entire another year just because they were too headstrong on what they're getting back? I mean, if you're the Texans and it's either have Deshaun Watson sit or get even just a second-round pick out of him, I'll take the second-round pick because at least you're getting something for a guy that wasn't going to play for you anyway, and you remove that cap. So it really depends on if these teams are going to jump the gun and throw all these chips at the Texans, or if they're all going to sit back and patiently wait for the price to drop a little bit. Because right now, 3 first-round picks and 3 players for a guy who didn't even play last year, that's a little steep.
No, I think it's them trying to recoup all those first-round picks they've traded over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I think someone will pay something similar. It might not be 3 All-Stars. It could be very similar to the Russell Wilson trade. They got a Noah Fant. They got a Shelby Harris. And I can't even think of the third. Oh, Drew Lock. That's why I couldn't think of it. But that's what I'm saying. It could end up being 3 players like that. It might not be 3 superstars. It might just be. But I think someone will eventually pay it, or maybe it'll go down to 2 first rounds, but they'll definitely get it. But I think the last thing we should talk about with Deshaun Watson is just because he was cleared from his criminal charges, he still is facing those civil lawsuits and will still most likely be suspended by the league, whether that'll be 6 games, 8 games, or less. So even though you're trading on, he might not even make a huge impact. He might miss the first half of the season for his new team. So that is something to keep in mind too with Deshaun Watson. But 2 other trades happened before we get into the juicy part of the show, the free agency, and they're big trades. Khalil Mack headed to the Chargers for exchanges of picks, and then Amari Cooper traded for a 5th-round pick to the Cleveland Browns, but that caused Jarvis Landry to then be cut. Out of those 2 moves, which one do you think will make the biggest impact on their new team?
I got to say Khalil Mack to the Chargers, and I'll give you my reasoning. I think Amari Cooper at this point in his career and Khalil Mack at this point in his career, Amari Cooper is the bigger name. I think Amari Cooper has the potential for the bigger splash. I think Khalil Mack is the bigger piece because you already have a dominant defense in the Chargers. Now, we've seen teams with 2 amazing edge rushers on the same team. You have one big guy, everybody double teams that guy, and then he doesn't really do much. But when you have multiple great pass rushers on one team, you can't double team him or the other guy's wide open. I hate to say it, but I'll go back to the Texans when they had Jadeveon Clowney fresh out the draft and J.J. Watt in his prime. Everybody's focused on J.J. Watt. Clowney's getting home. So then you start focusing on Clowney, Watt's getting home. You can't stop both of them. So now you got these two big edge rushers. I think Khalil Mack is going to feast. I think Joey Bosa just went up in value as well. If you have an IDP league, and Amari Cooper, I think he's a great player. I think the only reason he went for a fifth instead of going for more was because of his contract. But the reason I don't like him is because they had Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and couldn't do anything with the pass game. And you could say, oh, it's because Odell's not what he used to be, but he goes to the Rams and suddenly he looks good. Jarvis Landry has shown flashes in the past. Like, we know he can be a good receiver, but there's something going on, whether it's Baker, whether it's the offensive coordinator, whether it's the offensive line not giving him time. There's something going on with that Browns team that the pass game is not working. And until you figure out what that is and fix that, I don't think Cooper is going to make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, you basically took the words right out of my mouth from talking about Amari Cooper. I don't know. Like, if you would have asked me this last offseason, I would have said Amari Cooper probably would have been the bigger signing, because I think Amari Cooper probably has more left than Odell Beckham. And then we saw Odell Beckham get traded and go to the Rams and look like a competent wide receiver again. And that's why everyone doesn't want Baker Mayfield, because they think all of a sudden now it's Baker Mayfield's fault because these solid wide receivers were not producing. So I think because of that, plus I've been the one that's questioning how solid Amari Cooper is. Amari Cooper had a heck of a second half that first year he got traded to Dallas. Since then, maybe because there's been other receivers around that the Cowboys have been trying to feature, he has not produced up to the Amari Cooper that everybody thinks he should be. So could you say Amari Cooper is much better than Odell Beckham, especially the way Odell Beckham looked in LA? No, I don't think you can say that. They're probably almost a lateral move. So I think Khalil Mack's the bigger move here. I agree with you with the two edge rushers as well. And I think that you can even compare it to Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney last year in Cleveland.
Yeah, George, I'm right there with you. I do think, and Tyler as well, I think Khalil Mack is the bigger trade. But I am excited to see Amari Cooper in the Browns. I think I have a little bit more faith in him than both of you guys. And, we talked about his contract, but after some of these free agent deals, seems like a steal to get Amari Cooper for 3 more years at his current rate. And maybe it's finally the guy that, can help Baker turn it around in Cleveland. Don't forget, he did play through 2 torn labrums last year. Or, maybe if they are the dark horse that goes out and pull Deshaun Watson, like that is a great number 1 target for him. So Khalil Mack, I think, makes the biggest impact on paper. But he's a little bit older. He has dealt with some injuries in our connected Madden franchise. He's wanted to retire on Tyler's team for 3 straight years. So maybe Madden knows something we don't. So I do like the Khalil Mack and what the Chargers are doing, but I think Amari Cooper could be, a nice addition. And it's a true number 1 wide receiver that they'll have. Like, say what you want, Odell Beckham, there was something wrong with that fit from the day he got there. He was just never the guy he was in New York or the guy we saw in Los Angeles. And then Jarvis Landry, is great as he is like a slack guy. So Jarvis Landry or Amari Cooper being a true number 1 could be a big boost to that offense.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see if we are right or wrong on that, but we all seem in agreement. So why don't we move on to, as Cody called the meat of the show, our free agency reactions. And as I remind you on the top of the show, make sure you go to thecouchgms.com. You can check out our NFL free agency tracker, where we are tracking all the signings across the league, not just fantasy relevant, but all the defensive positions as well. We'll keep updating it periodically throughout the day as the free agency period becomes official and we start rolling through to calming down in the next few days. But I think we'd have a couple of guys in here we wanted to talk about for fantasy relevance in their new fits. And why don't we start off at the quarterback position with Mitch Trubisky, the new presumed starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Big Ben era is over. It's been going on for so long, it's going to be hard to tell how a quarterback's going to fare in that system. But Mitch Trubisky, not only was he cheap because he came as a free agent, was probably one of the better fits for that offense because of that, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Honestly,
I think everybody's kind of hard on Mitch Trubisky. I think it's a lot of laughing because, like, look, it's Mitch Trubisky of all people. But honestly, Mitch Trubisky really wasn't that bad. Like, he wasn't great. He wasn't elite, but he, did enough to make the playoffs. He did enough to win games. And can we honestly say that where Big Ben was in his career, they were still a playoff team or borderline playoff team, depending on a couple more wins, but based off of where Big Ben was in his career when he retired, is Mitch Trubisky really worse than what Big Ben was? Big Ben couldn't throw more than 10 yards. He had no shoulder left, and he was 300 pounds trying to run. Honestly, look worse than Peyton Manning trying to run the ball out there. And I think Mitch Trubisky's better than that. I think Mitch Trubisky's coming out. He's going to have some good receivers to throw to. He has guys like Chase Claypool he can lean on. He has the running back and Najee Harris. Like, he has the pieces around him. He's just got to be good. He doesn't have to be great. He just has to be good. He has a solid defense, good weapons. Like, I think this is a great signing by the Steelers. Don't go throwing away your entire future with picks and all your cap and everything else to go get another guy. Go get a guy like Mitch Trubisky that you can win now with. And, if he's not the guy, cool. You can wait until there's a better quarterback draft class and then draft a quarterback then.
I'm with you on that. I think the Mitch Trubisky signing, as much as I don't want to admit it as a Packers fan, I think this was the best signing so far to date for the Steelers and overall. They got a good value out of it. They got a quarterback that, like you mentioned, how much difference is he can't be much worse than what Big Ben was last year. And that still got into the playoffs. So even if he takes them a little bit further, he's, more athletic. It might hurt like your Deontay Johnson. He might not be the reception machine he's been under Big Ben. That is something we'll have to wait and see how the wide receiver core shakes out. But they still have Najee Harris. They have Pat Freiermuth, the young tight end that he can rely on. I really like this move. Just please, I've already seen it start. But his name is Trubisky. Let's not start the Trupitsky, like calling him that. Like, let's not do that. Just call it Trubisky. Call him Mitchell. Trupitsky, that's got to go.
It's like
I'm so
Pennsylvania.
glad I haven't heard that one yet. Oh, no. I guess it's a Pennsylvania thing. I don't know. But, nah, I mean, I agree with you guys. Mitch Trubisky was a solid fit there for Pittsburgh, and I think people are underestimating him because they still have the Matt Nagy effect on him. So we'll see how he performs now. He's also was really loved in Buffalo, by the way. I know a lot of people, a lot of players for Buffalo were tweeting out congrats to Mitch after that signing, and they really grew close with him in just 1 year in Buffalo. So we'll see how that goes. Tyler, I know you had something to ask about our next guy, so I'll let you move us on.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those signings that's going to fly under the radar. Nobody's really going to talk about or care about right now until it becomes important. But the Giants went out and signed quarterback Tyrod Taylor to be their presumed backup, one of the top backups on the market. And guys, I got to ask a question here. Now, we've seen Daniel Jones last year we thought was going to be the last chance for Daniel Jones, and the entire season was just horrendous. Like, it's not, you can't just completely blame Daniel Jones. The injuries left and right for that team were just horrible, but the whole season was bad. It was an ugly team to watch. Nobody wanted to watch a Giants game, even if their favorite team was playing them, because it was so bad to watch. So Daniel Jones gets another chance. If they both are healthy, we'll use that as a caveat, who is going to be the quarterback for this team by the end of the season? Tyrod Taylor, Daniel Jones, or even somebody else? What do you guys think?
I'll start.
Okay. All right, George, you start. Nope, you're starting. You said I'll start.
Okay. So to end the season, I'm going to go with Tyrod Taylor. Even if Daniel Jones starts the year, I haven't seen anything out of Daniel Jones enough for me to say he is a presumed starting quarterback in the NFL. People can say differently. That's fine. But they are going to give him one more chance. Maybe the team around him will stay healthy this time. Maybe it won't, but I don't think he's going to show enough, and they're going to move on to Tyrod Taylor. And Tyrod Taylor has looked solid in his last few stops when he has gotten starts. He won a game with Houston, which is an accomplishment, and did look solid for some parts of the season. He looked really good in LA 2 years ago before he got the punctured lung. So I think the Giants are going to eventually make that move, and they're going to have a stronger second half than they had a first half. And if they make the move early enough, maybe they'll be a borderline 7 seed even, because I do think that he could get the best out of some of those weapons around him that Daniel Jones could not last year.
So I'm conflicted with this question. I really am. Tyrod Taylor, I think it's interesting. One, he signed a 2-year deal. So I think he'll be around for both years of it. And that tends to believe to me, and this is just, I think it'll be Daniel Jones. And if we're going on the caveat, they're both healthy from start to finish. Why? Because that way they're not officially tanking, but they're tanking. I'm giving up on my Daniel Jones is going to break out in year 3. Maybe this new coaching staff can, but I just don't see it. I think their goal is to get Tyrod Taylor in there, a veteran with the new coaching staff that can learn the playbook and then come in and be a mentor for the rookie quarterback next year. So I don't think their goal is to win games, but I'll put that in quotation marks. I think their goal is to, no, this is a rebuild year. They're taking a down year. If Daniel Jones surprises the world and takes a year 4 jump and comes out baller, that's a happy surprise. But I do think Daniel Jones will start to finish, but it might not be because they're trying to win games rather than they're trying to lose games. No, not trying to lose games, but intentionally, because I don't want to get into that whole Miami Dolphins thing, but we definitely have
Browns too.
Yeah.
All right, guys, why don't we then move from the quarterback position to the running back position? And we talked last week, Cody, about a lot of Cardinals players that were potentially leaving. Well, the 2 Cardinals running backs, we have a resolution already. James Conner was re-signed by the Cardinals on a 3-year deal, and Chase Edmonds is headed to Miami. So I'm going to combine these two.
Weird
Thanks, Tyler. I'm going to combine these two.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is going great here. I'm going to combine these two. So Edmonds obviously going to a backfield that was not very successful at all last year. James Conner looked very good when he was the solo back in Arizona. Which one of these guys do you like the fit better?
Conner. Easy. I mean, you just kind of like
Edmonds
set it up nicely for me here. Conner looked great as a sole back. Edmonds is now gone. He goes over to Miami, which even though he thinks Edmonds is a better pick, and I'm really excited to hear why, Edmonds is going to what I'm going to consider another fantasy running back wasteland because they have Salvon Ahmed, they got Myles Gaskin, I think they still got Malcolm Brown too, and now you got Chase Edmonds. You got 4 running backs. All of them are okay at best. I'm not a huge Chase Edmonds fan to begin with. I thought he was a little overrated, so I don't like it. I think there's going to be a split. I think Edmonds will be the number 1 back, but I don't think he's going to do enough to be fantasy relevant.
All right, I'll give my counter argument, and I do think this is a 50-50 question. Like, I think we're at this point in the season, we're flipping a coin on which one will have a better fantasy season. For me, I just knocked Conner down a little bit because he was mostly all touchdowns last year. He did come alive a little bit before he got hurt near the end of the season. Both these guys have health question marks going into the following season as well. They just aren't guys that have typically been able to stay healthy for a full season. But for me, I'm picking Chase Edmonds, not just because he is a local product of the Central PA area, but also because of the new coach, Mike McDaniel. He comes from the Shanahan tree. Shanahan is that tree dating all the way back to his dad, has been known for creating 1,000-yard rushers like that. They just make running backs good. And I think he'll fit in nicely. I'll compare him to a guy like Elijah Mitchell. I think that's the role we're going to use him in. He doesn't have the full breakaway speed as another 49ers running back, Raheem Mostert, who is actually a free agent. But just squeeze him in there, let him do his thing, give him the lead back. Yes, they'll mix and match. So it is interesting that I'm picking Chase Edmonds, but you compare them to a running back wasteland, which we often joke about the 49ers being one of those. But I don't know, maybe it's just because of how it was injury related, but they seem to really dive into Elijah Mitchell. And I think that's the type of production we could see out of Chase Edmonds this upcoming season.
I mean, I think I'm going to lean with Tyler here and go with James Conner because we saw more out of James Conner, and he's in the same system now as he was last year. But I do think this is a big stock up for Chase Edmonds and even a little bit of a stock up for James Conner, seeing as they split. And Chase Edmonds has shown to be an explosive back. Hopefully he's not going to be overused to the point where he does get hurt. I'm hoping he can stay healthy because they have a lot of backs around him now in Miami. And I have faith that Miami run game only has place to go up from here. But there's one other running back we wanted to talk about in this. And the Buffalo Bills, we were spotlighting as a team that wanted a running back, that needed a running back that could bring somebody in and be fantasy relevant right off the bat. And then they make the great signing of signing J.D. McKissic. Well, I think it's a little anticlimactic for me. Do you guys think that this is going to mean anything for fantasy, or is this just making the Buffalo backfield even worse because of a bigger split?
I think it means a lot, and I don't think it's because of J.D. McKissic. I think the fact that they went out and signed a guy like J.D. McKissic instead of trying to make a move for a bigger running back, to me, shows that they are actually finally trusting Devin Singletary. We saw Singletary coming alive at the end of the season, so I think the fact that they went for a lower-named running back means that they're going to trust Singletary a little bit more moving forward, and I think McKissic is going to be more of a third down, passing downs type of running back. I don't think he's going to be very fantasy relevant, but he'll slot in there and he'll catch a few passes.
Yeah, I would put McKissic up there with the must-have handcuff. He's not your Tony Pollard. He's not with whoever is backing up Dalvin Cook. But I think it is a value pick. We saw what he did in relief for Antonio Gibson when he was in Washington. He's a solid running back. I do think it shows some trust in Devin Singletary. I also think it also puts him into consideration to adding, maybe a rookie running back in the second round. There's not, I feel like every year we're at the point where there's not there shouldn't be a running back in the top 10. That's just not where their value is at. But there's definitely some guys late first round, second round talent that they could add, and it will unfortunately make it a more convoluted backfield. But I think that'll be a path that they end up taking.
So we still have a lot of question marks in Buffalo. Tyler, I thought that was a very interesting way to spin it, and maybe it is they're going to try to give more of a put more faith in Devin Singletary, but I think J.D. McKissic has to have some kind of value in the pass game going there. They got that kind of back for a reason. So it's going to be the first, second down, and then the third down back in McKissic potentially, which could be good for fantasy. You don't really know. Moving on to the wide receiver position. Christian Kirk got so much money. And while I think he's a solid receiver, I think the Jaguars way overpaid for a Christian Kirk. He's probably going to be their wide receiver one. Do you think he's going to be a decent wide receiver for fantasy? Could he be a wide receiver two? Is he a borderline flex? Is it going to be a disaster in Jacksonville like it was last year? Where do you put this pick for his value?
He got money. You're not going to.
He got a lot of money.
You're not going to pay him that kind of money unless you're planning on using him. And even though he had a rough rookie season, Trevor Lawrence is still nothing to turn your head at. I mean, he's still a good quarterback. So I think Christian Kirk is definitely going to have some fantasy value. Is he going to be one of your early wide receiver one targets? No. Is he a decent wide receiver two target? Yeah, he could definitely fit in there. I mean, we saw what DJ Chark was able to do with the Jags when he was fully healthy, and now you're bringing in another exciting young receiver. It's interesting to me that Kirk is not what I consider one of the best receivers in the NFL. He wasn't even in consideration for me, and now he's one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL. And all I think this does is really mess up the wide receiver market, because now you got guys like Devontae Adams and Chris Godwin who were tagged and looking for real contracts. And you got guys like A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf that are going to be looking to get re-signed and get new contracts. And you got them going into these talks where you're offering them respectable money, and they're going to be like, well, Christian Kirk's making this and I'm better than him, so why don't I make this? It's just going to mess up the wide receiver market, which is going to change a lot of things up. A lot of guys are going to be losing out on some money, getting cut, moving to different teams because teams can't afford the contracts that the Jags are dishing out over here. But long story short, yeah, I think he's going to be a good fantasy wide receiver. I think that the Jags have the pieces. They got James Robinson. We'll talk about him later, but they got Evan Engram. They still have Trevor Lawrence. They just got Christian Kirk. They have the pieces.
Zay
It's will
Jones.
they Zay Jones. Woo. But will they put it all together and actually be a real team? Probably not. It's still the Jags. Jags gonna jag.
Yeah, man. Christian Kirk, that was a fun time watching those contract numbers come out. I know they backtracked and it's not as high as it was originally reported. That was like a big up too. There's a lot of bonuses. It's still high for a guy like Christian Kirk. And we talked about their pieces, and we're going to talk about DJ Chark next. But I got to ask you guys. I have two questions. The first, I'm going to stick with just the Jags. Going into next year, do you like Marvin Jones or Christian Kirk more?
Christian Kirk.
And the fact that is it just because of money?
I think Kirk's a better receiver than Marvin Jones, but I also was not on the Marvin Jones bandwagon as heavily as you guys were, especially George. I know he was heavily on the Marvin Jones bandwagon the last few years.
I mean, Marvin Jones is like all reliable. He did not have a great second half. He started off the season pretty solid. I think it's going to be Christian Kirk is the guy to own. Marvin Jones might actually even get a little bit of value though out of this because it's going to be some eyes for the defense to look away from him. And assuming Trevor Lawrence takes a second-year jump.
Absolutely. And it is worth noting that there are some reports that Laviska Shenault is available on the trade market now after they have signed some guys. But as I transition into the next big free agent wide receiver that's been signed so far in DJ Chark, just looking at the money aspect of it, over $100 million in guaranteed money, I think the Chargers spent yesterday. Or not the Chargers, the Jags. I'm so sorry for the Chargers fans and comparing you to the Jags. I did not mean that. That was a bad slip. But Jacksonville, you look at their offense. They have James Robinson, Travis Etienne at running back. They have Marvin Jones, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Laviska Shenault, and Evan Ingram at tight end. You go over to this team that signed, DJ Chark for a 1-year, $10 million deal, which I know is because he's coming off an injury. But the Lions, they have DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, Quez Watkins, TJ Hawkinson. Like, why do I still feel like they didn't spend as much money, but they still have the better offense after the team that just spent over $100 million?
And the GOAT.
I mean, I don't
Yes, I
know.
do.
Well, it's Jared Goff compared to rookie Trevor Lawrence. There's not much of a difference there. No, honestly, I don't know if you can even say they're better, but they're at least comparable. And for the savings that the Lions have, and I mean, that's part of that's bringing guys up through the system as compared to signing them off of free agency as veterans. But I honestly would probably think I would lean the Lions offense over the Jaguars, especially knowing you can build with much more cap around it.
I'm that's where I'm at. And the whole Christian Kirk thing blows my mind. Like, why they picked him over DJ Chark. I mean, he's only had 4 100-yard receiving games in his 4 years career. 4 games where he had over 100 yards. Like, that's mind-blowing to give all that money to it. But DJ Chark, to me, was one of the most interesting guys on the market. I hate that he went to Detroit. He's still 25, super athletic, 6'4", 210, but has a lot of speed behind him. I don't know if Detroit was the best place for him to go to like break out and be like a guy that could get big money. But then we saw Zay Jones and Christian Kirk get big money as supplementary pieces on other teams. So I think that might not be the best signing, but it's been my favorite signing. And I hate that it's the Lions of the whole free agency so far.
He says this as the Packers are going to win the division again.
Yep, always.
Hey, I still, hate the move. I don't like our teams getting better.
Yeah, you don't hear me out here going, I can't believe Christian Kirk went to the Jags, and I can't believe, Evan Ingram was the tight end that I was hoping the Titans would get, and he went to the Jags. I can't believe, because the Jags still suck. I mean, it's the Lions that made the move, and the Lions still suck. I mean, do they have a chance of being better this year? Absolutely. Are they a chance of winning the division this year? No, absolutely not. But anyway, let's move on to the other receivers. Michael Gallup did re-sign with the Cowboys on a long-term deal. I mean, that's pretty expected after the trade of Amari Cooper that they lock up one of their own. But the other guy out there, bit of an interesting move, and this one could be your stock up, stock down watch of the week, and it is Russell Gage. He went from a team where he was a number 3 receiver, and when he got the chances, he was starting to look good. And then the number 1 and number 2 receiver went away. Gage became the number 1, and now he's going to the Bucks, where he's going to go right back to being a number 3, number 4. I mean, honestly, depending on breakouts, could be a number 5 receiver for the Bucks.
I mean, I would have to assume this signing is to replace Antonio Brown, at least in their mind. So I'll slot him at number 3 for now. I get exactly where you're coming from, though. But really, I think it has to be, at least looking at it, a stock down for the moment, because he went from being a wide receiver 1 to a wide receiver 3, and knowing how Antonio Brown, while solid when he was on the field and not jumping off the field, saluting the fans at MetLife, he was semi-inconsistent just because there's not a lot of targets to go around for 3 solid wide receivers and a potential tight end there in that offense. So he could have some fantasy value in the coming year. It's just going to be the whole Tampa Bay wide receiver carousel we've been dealing with. Just add in Russell Gage now, and we thought we might have just had 2 next year.
Yeah, I think Russell Gage, they did sign him 3 years, $30 million, so they definitely paid a commitment for him. Chris Godwin could start the year on PUP coming off the ACL injury, so he could be the number 2 filling in for the number 3 once Chris Godwin gets back. He is going to play with Tom Brady, who led the league in passing years, so I think his stock is actually about the same, if not up, because of he's going to a better system compared to where he was last year. I mean, Matt Ryan threw to him some games, didn't he? Even though he was the number 1, he still had games with 0 catches and 0 targets. Like, say what you want about whether that was him getting open or Matt Ryan not targeting game plan or stuff like that. So I think it's still consistent, and I think he's a guy that you might be able to take a late round flyer in your fantasy drafts, get it, a solid 4 or 5 weeks out of him, trade him before the PUP line comes up with Chris Godwin, gets him at, like, that's the type of guy you might look to draft for early season that might taper off as Chris Godwin gets healthier and then back into the lineup.
I guess I'm just higher on guys like Tyler Johnson and Scotty Miller than you guys, because I like the potential that those guys bring to the table, especially with the speed aspect. I feel like having their speed on the field alone opens up the rest of the receivers, so they're going to get more playing time. Guess that's just me. I don't know. I don't really like.
I mean, you're
Russell
missing
Gage.
Cyril Grayson, I think, too. I mean, that's a good point. Grayson really got a lot of hype from that coaching staff at the end of the year.
Am I saying that Gage is going to be a complete bust and never used? No, but I think he's going to be too inconsistent for me. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's on the field all the time. And when you have a guy like Tom Brady, I mean, Gronk isn't back yet, but I expect Gronk to come back. That's already some targets that are automatically stolen away. They're going to use the run game. They have been the last couple of years, whether that's going to be with Ronald Jones or if Leonard Fournette comes back, or even if there's somebody else in there, maybe even Keyshawn Vaughn steps up, takes a starting role. There's some touches that goes away. Mike Evans is going to be the number 1. Godwin back eventually. I don't like the potential for touches that Russell Gage has, especially with the speedsters in there too, the young guys. So I don't like him. I would avoid him in drafts, but Cody does make some good points on some potential, draft now, trade for later kind of move. But guys, let's go ahead and move on to the tight ends, because I did mention some tight ends in there, especially my guy, Evan Engram. I was hoping he would go to the Titans because they need one. Zach Ertz, he stays with the Cardinals. Evan Engram, he goes to the Jags, part of that money that they were dishing out. CJ Uzama also on the move. So, guys, which of these tight ends do you think is going to have the biggest fantasy impact this season?
I think that has to go to Zach Ertz, because Zach Ertz really did have a breakout when he did go to Arizona last year. He seemed like he liked the area, wanted to stay. He gets his wish, stays a 3-year contract there. He might even end his career there in Arizona. We talked about hitting the fantasy jackpot last year when he got traded. We got him and we got Dallas Goedert both freed up as, separated and freed up and raised their fantasy value. I think you're going to see similar this year to what you saw at the end of last year. The dark horse pick there, Uzama going to the Jets, is very interesting. The Jets haven't had a solid tight end in a while. We don't know what we're going to get out of Zach Wilson. We've been talking a lot about Trevor Lawrence in this episode because of how much the Jaguars made moves, but we haven't talked much about Zach Wilson, who also struggled in his rookie year, is looking for a bounce back here. The Jets are trying to put pieces around him. Uzama was a key part of that Cincinnati Bengals run to the Super Bowl. He could be the safety net that Zach Wilson was missing last year. So I want to keep an eye on him. He's not somebody I would put too far up your draft board and, overpay for, but If you're going to take a second tight end in the draft in the late rounds, he's somebody that should be on your radar.
No, I was going to pick Uzama as the guy, but there should not be a second tight end on your radar. Nope. That's not how you draft fantasy football. You get one tight end and you play the waiver wires. You don't need two, especially if you get a guy early.
Don't hear what I'm not saying. If you're taking a top tight end, even if you're taking a Zach Ertz, if you're taking a top 6 tight end, you're definitely probably not drafting another tight end. If you're waiting until round 12 to take a tight end, I don't see a problem with taking a second tight end on your roster.
I think that's a terrible strategy, but we can fight that off all off season.
Okay.
About
this is the same guy who drafted like 9 wide receivers and ended up trading Stephon Diggs for Cam Newton because of the fact that he's like, well, I have way too many receivers because that's how I drafted, so I guess I'll just give you Stephon Diggs for nothing. And I ended up beating you with Stephon Diggs in the championship because you did that. Cody has an interesting draft strategy. I'm not going to go out and say it doesn't work. I'm not going to, because I've seen what it can do. I can see how dangerous it is. Your top 2 receivers
championship matchups.
You can see his top guys
1 victory
get hurt, and he still has number 1 receivers slotting in. He has that trade value. Cody's also a heavy trade guy, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're the kind of guy that doesn't like the trade. Maybe you're the kind of guy that likes to stick with their drafted team for the most part, make a couple free agent moves if needed. If you're that kind of guy, take 2 tight ends. You never know. If you got a guy like Travis Kelce, you don't really need one on the roster right away. If you take a guy like an Evan Engram or a CJ Uzama, take a second tight end, because odds are one of those guys is going to bust. It really depends on your strategy. Don't just buy into one set way and not look at other possible ways. And we'll get into that kind of thing in the offseason when we give you some tips and tricks when it comes to drafting and give you some more advice for this upcoming fantasy season. Because, look, we want to see you win some championships. I got 2 championships. Cody's got a championship. George, you have the next guy on our
I got
list to
one
talk
this year.
about.
I got a championship this year. Get out of here.
Not in our main league.
I also
now.
Never mind.
No, please.
I was
take it away.
Defend myself a little bit, and I just don't see the value in drafting if you're already like you're essentially punting on the tight end position, and you're like down there looking at guys like Evan Engram and Uzama, like you have the whole waiver wire available to you. Like I feel like I'd rather take a late round flyer on a potential breakout running back, potential breakout wide receiver, a rookie quarterback to see how they do in week 1, than have CJ Uzama sitting on my bench. And if that's the top waiver wire the next week, well, he's the top waiver wire next week. But tight ends normally aren't after week 1 or week 2. That's why I'm saying you shouldn't draft 2 tight ends. It also doesn't help that there was like 4 good tight ends all of last season, and the rest were all like willing to be not on your roster. You just had to have them. And then I was going to make another comment about our main league where I wasn't going to count Snyder's championship because I wasn't in the league that year. But as someone that argues that the Packers have 13 championships, it counts further back than Super Bowls. I feel like that would be not a fair argument for me to have. So, Tyler, you do have 2 championships. I want to give you credit for that.
Thank you.
Well, then I
George, you got to get one still.
No, yeah.
You got to get
the
one.
The one you cheated in doesn't count.
way back. Anyway, we don't talk about defense as much here, but it is worth noting that the Chargers defense has moved way up the defense rankings this week, with not only the trade for Khalil Mack that we mentioned earlier, but they were the winners in the bidding war for J.C. Jackson, the top young corner that left the New England Patriots. That defense has some scary pieces. We talked already about the sack potential with their 2 really strong edge rushers. They really shored up their secondary. Maybe they'll get Derwin James to stay healthy this year as well. How high in the rankings, approximately, I know it's early, do you put the Chargers defense?
Well, okay. I might maybe 3 rounds to go is when you should start taking a defense. I'm not
even saying draft a defense before. I'm saying in straight defense rankings, say 1 through 10, where do you slot them in compared to other defenses?
I was not prepared for this question, so I have to run through all the teams in my head. Right now, I mean, they seem like one of the top options. So I'm going to go ahead and say 4, at the moment. And while Tyler and you talk, I'll think of the 3 that are ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, you got teams like the Bucks. I mean, the Bucks defense is always up there. The Saints defense is worth talking about. The Colts have some pieces. I think the Bills are a strong defense. The Rams, definitely. You got Jalen Ramsey, potentially Von Miller if he comes back. Aaron Donald if he doesn't retire. I mean, I don't know what's real
He's not
anymore.
going to.
I don't think he is either, but you never know. Look, you got defenses up there that can make a splash. And originally, the Chargers defense wasn't even ranked in the top 10. I just pulled up the defenses here. The Chargers defense in fantasy for next season were originally ranked 27th, which is actually is crazy for me. I would honestly look at them like a top 5 defense. Defenses in fantasy are not just the best defenses overall, especially if you play in an IDP league. If you play in an IDP league, listen up. Guys like Jalen Ramsey, who you were like, oh, he's one of the best corners in the league. I need to go get that guy for IDP. No, you don't, because that guy is a shutdown corner, meaning the ball's not thrown his way because the guy's not open. And if the ball's not thrown your way as a corner, you're not going to get any defensive stats worth noting for fantasy. And that goes for fantasy defenses as well. If your defense is not allowing passes, is not allowing any run game, not allowing anything, it's just 3 and out, boom, move on, you're not going to get a lot of fantasy stats. You're not going to give up a lot of points, but your fantasy stats aren't going to be there. I remember the Chiefs of like 3 years ago, I believe it was, where they allowed like 30 points a game, but every game they were getting defensive touchdowns and forced fumbles and picks. They were playmakers, and that defense was good to own. And that's how I look at the Chargers this year. I think the Chargers defense, despite all the improvements, is still going to give up yards, is still going to give up points. But they got guys like Derwin James. They got guys like J.C. Jackson, who is a pick artist. You got guys like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa who are going to get you sacks. And sacks are points. Picks are points. You have playmakers on that team, which means you have point potential. Top 5 defense right there. I just spent a lot of time talking about defense for fantasy. That is crazy.
I am proud to start leading a defense chat that went more than 1 minute. Cody, do you want me to name who I would put above the Chargers, or do you want to take the lead first? Because I threw the question on you.
All right. So through my quick head, not looking teams up, I would have the Bills ahead of them. I would have the 49ers ahead of them. I would have probably the Saints ahead of them. The Rams, as long as Donald's back, I'd have ahead of him. And then the one team that it's going to sound crazy, but the New England Patriots. They're always a top fantasy defense. I know they're now losing J.C. Jackson, but they always play just solid defense. They make plays. They score touchdowns. So for me, that's a team that you could, probably not even get now that they're, if you're drafting for some reason at this point. I have no idea why you would be, but they're right up there. I don't know if I'd put them ahead of the Chargers, but that's like the sleeper team I'd add in there.
Okay. I had the Bills ahead of them, and I had the Saints as well, and the Rams. I thought 4 was a good number. I'm kind of toying between 4 and 5 because I'm debating the Colts. And then I have the Patriots right below that group. It's still early, it could change, but so I'm not that far off from you.
Perfect. See, that's why we are fantasy analysts. Oh my God.
Fantasy analysis. I want to be an NFL interview because...
This is why we're not professional analysts, because we can't talk. We know what we're talking about. We just can't talk. That's why you're going to listen to us on this podcast, and we ain't going to make it on the Sirius XM radio. That's not going to happen. If you can understand us, you're going to get the good... Dog. I mean, I don't know.
Can you scream into a microphone? You can be the Mad Dog.
We'll be on the late night Sirius XM where you're drunk enough that we just make sense with the way we talk. That's where we're going to be.
I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that.
Hey, you just have to make it.
Stay up past 7. What are you talking about?
Oh my gosh. Now we're getting personal. Guys, before we get too personal and George quits the show live on air, we still talk about the available free agents that are left. Remember, free agency, I know it's been crazy. There's probably been like 100 people that have confirmed or signed with, but it actually doesn't start until 4:00 on Wednesday. So Those when the deals can officially go into place, players can start taking their physicals. But there's still a lot of guys left. We haven't heard anything. Which player available is the biggest name out there, the one you're most interested to see where he goes?
I'll start, I guess, because no one seems to want to jump in. I think the best wide receiver on the board, especially because of age, is Juju Smith-Schuster. I know there's still a very strong feeling that he's going to stay in Pittsburgh, but if he doesn't, I'm very interested to see where he ends up, and I think he's probably the biggest long-term impact wide receiver left on free agency.
I'd like to see him go to Kansas City and start making TikTok dances with Patrick Mahomes' brother. I think it's meant to be, really.
Well, you're interesting.
Yeah, I'll go with my guy. So look, there are definitely some big names on this board, some guys that are very important. I'm going to go with the lower name guy because I think that he's going to go somewhere cheap, and I don't think that in all the years he's been in the league, he has really shown his potential yet, and that is my boy OJ Howard. We've been saying free OJ for years, and we're not talking about Simpson. We're talking about Howard. He is on a team where he was behind other tight ends, where even as the best receiving tight end on the team, he was being used as a blocker. Finally, he's a free agent. He has a chance to go somewhere else that'll utilize him. And he's coming off an Achilles injury. He is 27 years old. His prime might be coming to an end or even behind him, but I think he still has a lot of potential, and we haven't seen a whole lot out of him yet. I think he's going to go somewhere on a 1-year cheap prove-it deal, show that he really is the tight end he was drafted to be. A team like the Titans could be great. I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan. It's a team that doesn't even have a tight end, could definitely use that tight end presence. If Mo Alley Cox didn't sign with the Colts, I'd say that would be a good fit. If Evan Engram didn't sign with the Jags, I'd say that'd be a good fit. Right now, I like him going to the Bengals. I like that fit a lot. You got Joe Burrow. You got those other receivers that are going to take targets. So that leaves OJ Howard wide open as that big threat in the middle, especially with CJ Uzomah now moving on to the Jets. That's a guy that I really like. I like his potential, and I'm curious to see where he goes.
I do really like the OJ Howard to the Bengals. I think that would be a fun fit. Got a guy in there that's played the position before. You know, he doesn't have to be a huge asset. I mean, Uzomah only caught a few passes, but he made it some big plays. So I do like that one. My guy on the best available list. Again, I'm going to go with a little bit of an oddball too, and I think here's a guy that was a former first-round pick. You know, we thought was going to have a huge contract. He ended up taking a 1-year deal, was hurt most of it with a very odd finger injury, but that's Will Fuller. He's still a speed guy. You know, I think if he goes to the right team as a solid number 2, like I wouldn't put him on the Patriots. They have enough speed guys, but, you know, give him to a team. Now that I'm just blanking on the teams I was thinking of, but, you know, throw him out there. Let him take the top off in San Francisco while Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk work underneath and George Kittle work underneath. Let him go to the Saints and pair him next to Michael Thomas. Like, that would be a good dynamic. Like, add hit if the Saints could pull in Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller, like kind of get the band back together, and with Michael Thomas, like that would be a fun option. Obviously, Will Fuller would be a nice replacement for MVS if MVS isn't back with the Packers. But
you know where I'd like to see him go? I would honestly like to see him go to the Raiders. I think that would be cool. Look, I know everything that happened with Henry Ruggs and his like legal issues, and cool. He's gone. He was that speed threat, and that offense was looking pretty dynamic, having a top tight end in Darren Waller, and then you have the short-handed guy in Hunter Renfrow, and then you have the, you know, we still haven't seen full potential from Bryan Edwards yet, but he's still a solid receiver. Give a guy like Will Fuller to take the top off of a defense with those other guys underneath, and the Raiders' offense could surprisingly be very good. Even though they've already been surprisingly good. I think that would be a good fit. I really like his speed in Vegas. Almost said Oakland.
If you would have said Oakland, it would have been all right. But I think that wraps up all our free agency talk. There will be a lot of free agency talk next week. Unfortunately, it will just be George and myself because Tyler has to work an odd shift. And we're trying to get him to find a new job, but his job pays more than both of George and mine, so probably combined at this point. So he's not doing that anytime soon, but he'll be back with us in 2 weeks. George and I'll be back next week. But as always, thanks for listening to the Couch GMs podcast.
And guys, what free agents have we not talked about that you wanted us to talk about? Or what signing did we talk about that you completely disagree with? You think they're going to be huge. You think they're going to be a bust. Let us know. Because you know what? I've said it before. I'll say it again. This podcast is so much more fun for us and way more fun for you when you get involved. So please get involved.
Yes, sir, Tyler. Thank you one more time for listening in to the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth. See you all next week.
Oh.